While he held my hand at dinner, he was texting her under the table. The message read, "She's starting to suspect." When I asked, he said, "Just a client." But I found nudes, love notes, and their lease application. He called me dead weight and said I'd never survive. When I confronted him, he mocked me. "No one trusts you." My family defended him. So I printed every text and taped them too. I can still feel the heat of the printer. I remember the smell of ink, that faint metallic tang that fills the air when a machine is overworked. I stood in my living room at 2:47 a.m., barefoot, staring at the hundreds of sheets sliding out one by one. His words, her words, the proof of everything. Every "I love you," every nude, every message calling me crazy, clingy, dead weight. I taped them one by one on the wall of our shared apartment in downtown Indianapolis. The same apartment I had painted myself, the same walls I once thought would witness a wedding proposal, not this. The room looked like a crime scene of text bubbles, screenshots printed in full color, arranged in chronological order. He had been asleep in the next room when I started. I wanted him to wake up and see, really see, the words he wrote while pretending to love me. I didn't plan for this to be the night everything fell apart. It just happened because of one stupid vibration sound while his phone was on the nightstand. We were watching a movie. He held my hand, rubbing his thumb against my skin the way he used to when we first started dating. Then the screen lit up just a few words. "She's starting to suspect." My heart stopped. He noticed me glance over and casually grabbed the phone. "Just a client," he said, like he'd said it before. I didn't push, at least not right away. But when he went to shower, I picked up his phone. My hands shook so badly that Face ID almost didn't work. And then I saw it. Her name. Dozens of messages, photos, plans. He wasn't just cheating, he was building a new life with her, telling her how I was holding him back, how I'd never make it on my own. I took screenshots of everything. Thousands of them. My vision blurred, but I kept going until my phone storage was full. When he came out of the shower, I acted normal. I smiled. I even kissed him goodnight. But I didn't sleep. Instead, I printed everything. Every single lie, every humiliation. I taped them across the walls, the mirrors, even his closet door, like a forensic timeline of betrayal. When the sun started to rise, the apartment looked like something out of a nightmare. That's when I heard the bedroom door creak. His footsteps were slow at first, then quick, panicked. I didn't move. I just stood there, facing the wall of truth. He stopped behind me. The silence stretched out until he finally whispered, "What the hell is this?" I turned, holding one last sheet of paper, his message to her from just 2 days ago. "Don't worry, she'll never find out. No one believes her anyway." I handed it to him and said, "You were right about one thing." He frowned. "What?" I smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile he'd ever seen before. "No one believes me, yet." And as his face drained of color, I reached for the doorknob, where I'd left something taped outside for everyone else to see, something that would make sure they finally did. When I met Eric, I thought I'd won the universe's lottery. I was 27, working as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm in Indianapolis, trying to recover from my dad's death and an engagement that had collapsed 6 months earlier. Eric showed up like some kind of miracle, confident, calm, the kind of guy who made you feel seen. We met at a mutual friend's birthday at a brewery in Broad Ripple. He'd just started his own small IT consulting company, and everyone kept talking about how driven he was. He was the guy who fixed everyone's Wi-Fi and smiled while doing it. He wore this black watch that caught the light every time he gestured, and I remember thinking, he looks like someone who always has a plan. He texted me that night. By the next weekend, we were inseparable. He opened doors, paid for dinner, and told me he loved how genuine I was. Within 2 months, I'd moved into his apartment because he said, "It just makes sense, we're already spending every night together." And for a while, it did make sense. I cooked, cleaned, helped him design his company logo, even ran his social media for free because he said hiring someone else was too expensive. We were a team. He told me I was his foundation. But the cracks started showing about a year in. He'd come home later and later, blaming client emergencies. He kept his phone on silent and started sleeping with it under his pillow. When I asked why, he said, "You're paranoid, babe. You've got trust issues from your last relationship. Don't ruin a good thing because of your trauma." He said it with this tone that made me feel ashamed, like I was the problem. Then came the gaslighting. Subtle, constant, like a dripping faucet. He'd hide small things, my keys, receipts, even my phone, and when I couldn't find them, he'd say, "You're too scattered. I worry about you." When I got emotional, he'd sigh, "This is what I mean, you can't handle pressure." He didn't yell. He didn't hit. He just chipped away at me piece by piece until I started believing him. Even my family noticed I'd become quiet, hesitant. But when I tried to tell them he wasn't who they thought he was, they brushed it off. My mom actually said, "Honey, you always overthink. Eric seems like a good man." They liked him, loved him, even. He helped my brother get a new job, fixed my mom's laptop, bought my dad's old truck off my stepdad to keep it in the family. He was so damn good at playing the part. By the time I started suspecting something was off, he had already rewritten the story. To everyone else, he was the patient boyfriend trying to hold on to his unstable girlfriend. And the worst part, I had started to believe that too. Until that night. Until I saw those messages, proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that the man who told me no one trusts you was the same man feeding that exact line to another woman. He called me dead weight, told her he was done being her babysitter. That was the night I stopped crying and started planning. Because if no one was going to believe me, I'd make sure they saw the truth with their own eyes. And it started with what I taped outside that door. When Eric woke up that morning, blinking under the fluorescent light of betrayal, I wasn't crying or yelling. I was calm. That scared him more than anything. He looked around the apartment, at the papers covering every inch of wall space, screenshots of his affair, timestamps, heart emojis, nudes, even the messages where he said, "She's too dumb to ever find out." He started tearing them down, crumpling them, shouting, "You're insane. This is insane." I just watched. Because taped to the outside of our front door was something much worse. A single page, bold printed, that said, "If you want to know who Eric Miller really is, come inside." And beneath it, my phone number. It took about 15 minutes for the first knock. His coworker, Matt, lived down the hall. I heard the door open, his voice confused, then silence. Then Matt said, "Holy shit." I didn't stop him from coming in. In fact, I opened the door wider. Soon there were 3 of them. Neighbors we'd shared drinks with, laughed with, invited over for football games, staring at the evidence plastered around us like a sick museum. Eric tried to block the view, shouting at them to leave, but it was too late. They were already taking pictures. That was the moment I realized something inside him had cracked. He wasn't the calm manipulator anymore, he was cornered. His voice went high and frantic. He grabbed my wrist, hissed, "You think this makes you look sane? Everyone already knows you're unstable." And that's when I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I printed your messages because I knew you'd say that." The room went dead silent. I walked to my laptop and opened a folder labeled Clients. But inside was everything, backups of his chat logs, his texts, even voice memos he'd sent her. I hit play on one. His voice filled the room. "She's holding me back. I'll make her think it's her fault when I move out. She can't survive on her own anyway." He lunged for the laptop. I slammed it shut before he reached it, and that's when he said it, the line that would echo in my head for weeks. "You don't understand what's at stake. Not, you don't understand how I feel. Not, this isn't what it looks like. What's at stake." That phrasing chilled me. It wasn't guilt. It was fear, not of losing me, but of losing something else entirely. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame cracked. I thought that was the end of it. I thought maybe I'd finally be free. But the next day, the real escalation began. First, my boss called. Apparently, Eric had emailed her saying I was struggling mentally and might be unstable after a breakup. She said she'd noticed I seemed distracted lately and suggested I take unpaid leave for my own well-being. Then my mom called furious. "What's this about you attacking Eric in the apartment? He says you had some kind of episode." I stood there, holding the phone, staring at the empty space on the wall where his messages used to be, realizing what he was doing. He wasn't just trying to escape. He was trying to erase me. And that's when I decided I couldn't just expose him. I had to destroy the version of me he'd built in everyone's minds. But before I could even start, I found something in his desk drawer that changed everything. A document that explained why he was so desperate to control the story. It wasn't just about love or ego. It was about money. The drawer was locked, but I'd seen him hide the key before, inside one of his old running shoes in the closet. He thought I never paid attention to those small things, But when you live with someone who lies for sport, you learn to notice everything. Inside the drawer were folders, boring at first glance. Tax forms, invoices, receipts. But buried underneath was a thick envelope labeled Carter Holdings Partnership Agreement. At first, I thought it was just another client. But as I read through it, my stomach dropped. It wasn't a client, it was a merger. Eric's company was in talks to be acquired by a mid-sized tech firm based out of Chicago. The payout: nearly $400,000 upfront plus equity. Except there was a catch. One section, highlighted in yellow, read, "All assets, accounts, and client information must be clear of co-owner claims or disputes prior to signing." And right there, on a side note written in his handwriting, it said, "Need to remove Allison from any ownership claims before final signing." My name. I sat down dizzy. When Eric first started his business, I'd helped him build everything: logo, website, branding. He didn't pay me, but he'd always said, "Once we grow, you'll get a cut, you're part of this." He even had me sign documents to simplify taxes. I never read them closely. I trusted him. Now, reading through his notes, I realized what he was planning. He'd already started contacting a lawyer to formally remove my name from the LLC startup documents, claiming I'd only been a temporary contractor. He wasn't just cheating. He was erasing my contribution, rewriting the company as if I'd never been there, so when the merger went through, he'd walk away with everything. The affair wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. Because the woman he'd been messaging, her name was Jessica Lane, wasn't just someone from the gym, like he'd said once when her name flashed on his phone. She was listed on the documents too, Chief Marketing Officer of Carter Holdings. He was sleeping with the woman who was about to buy his company. And worse, he'd told her I didn't exist. There was an email thread printed in that folder, messages between Eric and Jessica that made my chest feel tight. Jessica: "She's not a problem, right? We can't risk any liability." Eric: "No, she's fragile. I'll make sure she's gone before the deal closes." Jessica: "Good, keep it clean. Keep it clean." That was what he meant when he said I wouldn't survive alone. It wasn't pity, it was planning. He wanted me gone, discredited, unstable, so that if I ever spoke up, no one would take me seriously. I spent the next 2 days in a fog. He didn't come home. My phone blew up with messages from my mom, my boss, and even his friends, all parroting the same narrative: I'd gone off the rails. He was building his case. That's when I realized I couldn't just expose him emotionally, I had to expose him legally. So I backed up everything, every screenshot, every document. I created a timeline linking my work on his company to the dates of the emails, showing my designs, invoices, even Slack messages between us where he called me partner. Then I made a new folder, one labeled Carter Holdings Fraud. I uploaded everything to a cloud drive under a new email address he couldn't trace. Because I knew what he was going to do next. He wasn't done yet. He was going to try to take me down completely. And when he did, I'd be ready to hit back in a way that would destroy him in front of everyone, especially her. But before I could even start my plan, someone unexpected reached out to me. Someone who would reveal just how deep this betrayal really went. Someone who claimed to be Jessica's husband. When Mike, Jessica's husband, messaged me, I almost deleted it. I shouldn't have trusted a stranger, but by then I had nothing left to lose and an addiction to truth that drowned out caution. His first line was simple: "You don't know me, but I think Eric's lying." He sent a photo of Jessica and him on a beach vacation, smiling, a ring visible on her finger. His tone was raw, angry, and small-town Midwestern. He worked at a plant outside of Cleveland, and his words had the bluntness of someone used to machines and overtime. That one message split my plan in two. I could keep burning bright and loud on my own, printouts, public shaming, social fallout, or I could become surgical. Mike wanted to believe his wife was faithful. He'd been lied to, and like me, he had the kind of wounded clarity that makes people dangerous in the best possible way. He wanted the truth out, not to destroy her for the pleasure of it, but because he couldn't live inside a lie any longer. The first rule I made for myself that week was: no violence, no illegal acts. Make it impossible for them to lie. If this was going to work, it had to be airtight, provable. Emotional ranting would be dismissed as a scorned woman. I needed documents, timestamps, contracts, corroboration, things that sounded like law and logic. things that made people uncomfortable for them to ignore. I mapped my targets: Eric, Jessica, the acquisition executives, and my own family who'd already bought Eric's version of events. I wrote down who believed him and why. My mom because he had fixer charm. My boss because of Eric's email with concern. Neighbors because of the spectacle in the hallway. I listed what each needed to be convinced. My mom needed something personal she couldn't ignore. My boss needed HR proof that my job was not in danger because of instability. The acquisition people needed to know a co-owner claim existed and had evidence. I started with the law. I set an appointment with a free legal aid clinic downtown and sat in a plastic chair for 2 hours while a volunteer attorney listened. I laid out the timeline, handed over a USB drive with all my prints, and watched him go pale when he skimmed the Carter Holdings partnership agreement and the email chain. His advice was precise and merciless. Document every contribution, preserve evidence, and file for temporary injunction if Eric tried to remove me from any corporate documents. He also said something I didn't expect. If you want people to look, hit their money. That's when my plan broadened from exposure to leverage. I formed 3 simultaneous tracks. Track A, legal, get a lawyer, file to protect my interest in the company, demand conservatorship of the documents. Track B, social legal proof, compile a public, factual dossier that would be hard to dismiss. Time-stamped screenshots, PDFs of the merger email with highlighted lines, bank transfers correlating to when I worked on the site, invoices I never got paid for, and my original files with metadata proving dates. Track C, emotional leverage, get my family and friends to witness the truth in a way they couldn't walk away from. That meant more than texts. It meant a presentation, in person. Mike became my unexpected ally for Tracks B, and C, he sent me copies of messages he had from Jessica that contradicted everything she publicly posted. He wasn't trying to get back at her for punishment. He wanted to understand. He agreed to come to Indianapolis for 2 days and sit with me while I assembled the dossier. He knew Jessica's patterns, little things she said, flights she took. He pointed out where dates didn't line up. His involvement gave me something I needed desperately: an outside witness who could say with authority, I'm not biased. I'm her husband, and this doesn't match. That line would complicate her narrative in a way my own words couldn't. I scheduled an aggressive 3-day operation. Day 1, secure everything. I copied every file from my laptop to 2 encrypted drives hidden at a friend's office and with Mike. I printed a new set of documents, clean, neat timelines connecting my work to invoice dates to the merger email. Day 2. Human proof. I arranged a small, controlled meeting with my mom and my brother under the guise of, we need to talk about something important. I emailed my boss with a neutral subject line and attached a redacted, professional summary of the company contribution I'd made, then asked for a 30-minute meeting. I wasn't begging, I was presenting evidence. Day 3, the acquisition people. I found the legal contact for Carter Holdings acquiring counsel and emailed them with a factual, bullet-pointed summary and attached the partnership agreement highlighting the clause about claims and disputes. I ended the email with, please confirm receipt. I have additional documentation and will pursue legal remedies if necessary. It felt like chess played against a man who had always played checkers. Eric had always expected emotional reactions: screams, pleas, breakdowns. He hadn't planned for cold, calculated presentation, for legal fences and third-party witnesses who had nothing to gain from my story. But I wasn't naive. I knew exposing the truth could blow up in my face. He could file for defamation. He could pivot harder, paint me as obsessive. So every move I made was filtered through the question, could I prove this in court? If the answer was no, I didn't do it. No speculation, no hearsay, only what could be time-stamped, verified, and backed up. By the end of day 3, I had a binder that looked like a briefcase for a prosecutor. I had my legal appointment confirmed for the following Monday. My mom had agreed, hesitantly, to come over and look. My boss had set a room for us to meet without HR present, and the email to the acquiring counsel had been marked red. When night fell, I taped one last page to the inside of the apartment door, not a threat, just a fact. Everything in this apartment is preserved and backed up. If you move or alter documents, those actions will be documented. I expected a response from Eric: anger, attacks, denials. What I didn't expect was how quickly he would escalate, and the next thing that happened would change everything about what I thought I was fighting for. I came home from the lawyer's office on Monday to find the apartment door cracked open. My first thought was that he'd broken in again. I walked in slow, phone camera recording. Every light flicked on as I passed. Nothing looked stolen, but something was different. The wall where I'd torn down the printouts was empty, perfectly cleaned, like someone had come in with bleach. The air smelled like chemicals and cologne. Then I saw it on the kitchen counter. A plain manila envelope. My name scrawled in black marker. No return address. Inside, a flash drive, a typed note, and a photograph. The note said, "You don't know who you're dealing with. Stop now." The photo was of me taken from outside my apartment window. I sat down hard. The blinds had been open the night I'd stayed up scanning the merger papers. My stomach flipped. It wasn't Eric's handwriting. The letters were too neat, too precise. I plugged in the flash drive, my heart racing. Inside was a single video file, maybe 2 minutes long. It showed Eric sitting in a car, talking on speakerphone. His voice was calm, measured, nothing like the defensive mess I'd seen days earlier. "She's got backups," he said. "I can't get them without making it obvious." Then a woman's voice answered Jessica's, cold, controlled. "Then make her disappear legally. Get her committed. She's unstable, right? You said no one believes her." He sighed. "That's what I've been doing, but she's smarter than I thought." "Jessica, then find something we can use. A record, a prescription, anything. I don't care what it takes, just make it clean." I stopped breathing. They weren't just trying to discredit me, they were planning to institutionalize me. And the footage, whoever filmed it wasn't doing it secretly. The camera was steady, positioned from the backseat. Someone else was there, recording it. I copied the file and hid the flash drive. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. That's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, one text. "You're welcome, keep quiet, or you'll wish you had." No name, no context. I called Mike immediately, my voice shaking. "Did you send me this?" He swore he didn't. He hadn't talked to anyone since he went home to Ohio. He told me to call the police, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not when I didn't know who had sent it or why. Because here's the thing. The flash drive came with metadata, a creation date from 6 weeks earlier, before I'd even discovered the affair. Whoever filmed that video had been tracking them for a while. So I started digging into Jessica Lane. She wasn't just chief marketing officer at Carter Holdings. She was a former forensic accountant who'd been investigated for embezzlement at her previous firm in Chicago, but the case was dropped quietly. Her husband, Mike, said she'd told him the company had made a mistake. But the timing was too neat. The case closed right before she got her position at Carter. If she'd done it once, maybe she was doing it again, with Eric as her front man. And maybe whoever sent me that footage was someone else they'd burned before. I barely slept that night. I kept hearing Eric's voice. "You don't understand what's at stake." Now I did. This wasn't just a love triangle, it was corporate fraud. He wasn't lying to me just to cheat. He was covering tracks for a deal worth hundreds of thousands. And Jessica had the skill set to hide the paper trail. The next morning, I emailed the acquiring company's legal department again. This time, I didn't attach anything. I just wrote one line. "There is active fraud in your pending acquisition. If you want proof, call me before noon." They called at 11:42 am. The man on the phone sounded cautious, like someone used to navigating quiet scandals. He asked me to forward the merger documents, including any communications between Eric and Jessica that indicated conflict of interest. I did. 5 minutes later, I got a response that made my chest tighten. "Thank you. You're not the first person to contact us about irregularities involving Miss Lane." And that's when I realized I wasn't alone in this anymore. But the relief didn't last long. Because that same afternoon, I got a call from my mom, sobbing. Eric had gone to her house, told her I'd been sending threatening emails, that I was being investigated for harassment. He'd shown her a fake police report, a fake report with my name on it. He wasn't giving up, he was escalating. And I finally understood. To end this, I'd have to take both of them down together. Not just expose them, trap them publicly where they couldn't twist the story again. And I already knew exactly where to do it. I thought the worst thing they wanted was to sleep with each other and rewrite the company so they could walk away richer. That felt bad enough. But discovering why they were willing to systematically erase me, My work, my voice, my very identity, was like peeling back a face and finding a machine underneath. Cold, calculated, totally without remorse. It started with a receipt I found in Jessica's trash when I asked Mike to forward me anything he had. He swore he'd never snooped, but he'd kept a file anyway, the kind of file men keep when guilt and love are confusing. The receipt was for a behavioral health consultation dated 3 months before I found the messages. Not a clinic. A small private practice in Chicago, a one-doctor office that billed as forensic evaluations. The amount was large. The invoice number matched a wire transfer from an account labeled Carter Holdings, HR Reserve. The transfer went through on the same day Eric told me he had an important client dinner. That was the thin thread. When I pulled at it, the whole seam came apart. Jessica didn't just want the company. She wanted immunity. She wanted the clean paper trail that major acquisitions require, no disputes, no ex-partners, no messy claims. In her mind, the easiest way to guarantee that was to ensure there was a legal and medical narrative that made me untrustworthy. If a reputable-sounding doctor said I was unstable, that gave them cover to remove me from any legal claim and to justify any odd behavior they needed to explain. It would also make any lawsuit I filed look like the desperate ramblings of someone mentally unwell. They had playbooks, clinical language, paperwork, witnesses, but it went deeper than corporate sanitizing. The documents I dug up, bank wires, emails with coded subject lines, a ledger of payments labeled reputation management, showed a network. Jessica had used the same pattern before. Plant a friendly liaison, insert the right evidence, and then have a clinician sign off on a diagnosis. Once someone's labeled unstable in the right channels, their credibility evaporates. Contracts get closed, money moves, and no one asks awkward questions. That was her scheme, accountant turned manipulator, and Eric was the part that required proximity. He was her face in the apartment, her alibi at family dinners, the person who could quietly steer perception in the right direction. And Eric, the man who kissed me, fixed my laptop, and called me his foundation, was a number cruncher in his own right, less for the spreadsheets than for the calculus of people. The partnership agreement wasn't just greed. It was the keystone to a shaped life they both wanted. They'd mapped out timelines, contingency scripts, and a verbatim lineup for when people asked questions. He had emails. If Allison goes public, call her unstable. Use the behavioral note. Insert references to trauma. Her family will latch onto it. He knew exactly which buttons to press with my mother, which phrases would get my boss to believe the concern narrative. The most horrifying part was how little emotion was involved. There was no heat, no frenzied theft of affection. There was a spreadsheet of outcomes and probabilities. They'd calculated that if they could discredit me, the acquisition would proceed with zero liability. Jessica would get the marketing helm officially, receive the payout, and walk away with a clean cover. Eric would get his cut, his escape from a life that suddenly had obligations, me, unpaid work, the household he'd been expected to share. To them, I was a variable cost. Remove the variable, maximize the profit. And then there was the other thing, one line on a printed email that felt like an ice pick. Jessica wrote, "It's easier to push someone out if they don't have anyone who believes them." She'd engineered that too. The dinners, the favors, the "I fixed your dad's truck" lies. Eric had slowly rerouted my family's alliances. My mom's defense of him, my brother accepting odd jobs from him, even my boss's call to suggest leave, they were all predictable outputs from the scripts he'd been running. He didn't have to convince them at once. He only needed to nudge them into patterns that would later look like natural loyalty. There was no remorse in any of the messages I found. There was a steady, almost clinical contempt. They used phrases like collateral damage and operational necessity. The language made me physically sick because it reduced me to a legible, manageable problem. They weren't lovers caught up in passion. They were co-conspirators who decided I was an acceptable loss. Knowing that changed everything. My anger was no longer just about being betrayed sexually. It became about being valued as an obstacle in a ledger. I had to stop seeing Eric as the man who held my hand during movies. He was the man who'd been planning how to manufacture my ruin while asking me to pick out paint swatches. Jessica wasn't a rival. She was a strategist who'd used intimacy and paperwork to erase people. The dread that followed wasn't romantic. It was practical. If they succeeded, I'd be legally neutered, removed from any claim, labeled unstable in public records, and left with nothing but the memory of a life they'd repackaged and sold. They'd erased me and called it efficiency. I tucked that knowledge into my binder like an extra weapon. It chilled me because it showed precisely how far they were willing to go and how methodical they were about it. There was no last-minute conscience, only a plan and the will to execute it. I understood then that this wasn't about getting even. This was about survival. They had built a machine to crush me, and the only way to stop it was to destroy the machine, piece by piece, in public, where it couldn't hide behind white coats and corporate cloaks. The night before I set my plan in motion, I sat on the floor surrounded by folders, flash drives, and legal printouts that looked more like war maps than evidence. My hands were steady. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't afraid. I'd spent weeks thinking about this moment, testing every possible outcome, and now all I wanted was for them to see me, really see me, before they watched everything they'd built collapse. It started with a meeting. Carter Holdings' legal department scheduled a confidential follow-up with me at a downtown office tower. The same place where, later that afternoon, Eric and Jessica were scheduled to sign their final acquisition papers. I wore the same navy blazer I'd worn the day I first helped Eric pitch his company, because symbolism mattered to me, even if it didn't to them. When I entered the conference room, there were 3 people waiting. A compliance officer, a lawyer, and someone from their forensic accounting team. The moment I set the binder down, the room shifted. They already knew something. The lawyer leaned forward. "We appreciate your cooperation, Miss Kent. We've been investigating Miss Lane for irregularities for several months. Your documentation confirms what we suspected." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. He asked me to stay for a second meeting, one I wasn't supposed to attend, but was advisable given the evidence I'd provided. That meeting was scheduled at 3:00 p.m., the same time Eric and Jessica were due to sign. At 2:58, the door opened. Jessica walked in first, heels sharp, expression all business. Eric followed, looking like he hadn't slept. When they saw me sitting there, a binder in front of me, both froze. Jessica recovered first. "What is she doing here?" The lawyer from Carter Holdings spoke calmly. "We've been reviewing new evidence concerning your merger disclosures. Miss Kent has been assisting in verifying information related to ownership and financial integrity." Eric's jaw clenched. "This is a setup." I didn't say anything. I just slid the flash drive across the table, the one with their conversation about making me disappear legally. Jessica tried to snatch it up, but the lawyer intercepted it. "We've already reviewed the contents," he said flatly. "And we've also verified the transfers made from Carter Holdings' HR reserve account to a private forensic evaluator in Chicago, an evaluator linked to false mental health assessments used to suppress potential whistleblowers." Silence. Then Eric turned on Jessica. "You said it was handled." Her voice went razor-sharp. "You idiot, you recorded that call." That's when I spoke for the first time. "No," I said quietly. "Someone else did. Guess you've made more enemies than me." Jessica's mask cracked, just a flicker, but it was enough. Eric buried his face in his hands. The compliance officer slid 2 folders toward them. "This meeting is being recorded. You are both formally suspended pending investigation. Effective immediately, the acquisition is void." Jessica stood, pale and furious. "You think this ends here?" she hissed at me. I looked her dead in the eye. "Oh, I know it ends here." They escorted her out first. Eric lingered. He tried one last card, his voice soft, pleading. "Allison, please, I was trapped. She threatened me. You don't know what she's capable of." I leaned forward. "You told her I'd never survive alone. Watch me." He didn't answer. He just looked at me like a man seeing a ghost, then followed the guards out. Within a week, the fallout began. The acquisition was canceled. Carter Holdings issued a quiet press statement citing ethical and legal concerns. Jessica was terminated. Eric's company dissolved before he could sell it. The IRS opened an inquiry into both of them after forensic accountants found evidence of falsified write-offs and undisclosed income. My boss, who had once believed Eric's lies, called me personally to apologize. She reinstated me full-time. My mom cried when she saw the news articles, realizing the man she'd defended had been weaponizing her trust. She asked if I could ever forgive her. I told her I was working on it. As for Mike, Jessica's husband, he filed for divorce and sent me one last message. You did what I couldn't. Thank you for ending it. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. The apartment is empty now. The walls are freshly painted. The wall of truth is gone, but I left one thing behind, a single page taped inside the closet, folded once. It's a printout of the very first text he sent her. She's starting to suspect. Underneath it, I wrote in black marker, "You were right." And when I locked the door for the last time, I smiled, not because I'd won, but because I'd finally made sure the truth couldn't be buried again. I walked out into the November air, free for the first time in years, whispering the last line I'd always wanted him to hear. You taught me how to survive, just not the way you planned.